So, hello out there, everybody in Boomer Time community. I am so glad you're here today. Nancy Cogar here, the host, and we have a really important topic to talk about today. And I think that, I can tell you that I've learned a few things, even preparing for the show. There are so many nuances out there, and if you're not familiar with those, they can cause you big trouble, from estate planning all the way to really any issue. So it's important to find people who know the issue, uh, know the minefield, and know how to negotiate it. So that I'm pleased to have somebody who does just that, David Smith, with me today, and he's with Sand Oak Financial, um, and he's here in Chattanooga. We know each other, and he is a divorce planner, financial, looks at the financial issues related to divorces, but more particularly, we're going to talk about it in a second. He's a retired lieutenant colonel. Thank you for your service, sir. I have to say that, and he really knows a great deal about things that can cause issues if you're in the military and you start talking about retirement in the military and so forth. So I hope you listen up today. And I'm going to give you some information too about how to get in touch with him, um, about your specific questions. And I really think that, could be a real benefit to you. So David, I'm excited about this. Welcome to Boomer Time.
Thank you very much, Nancy. I'm excited about it too. Happy to be here. Happy to talk about these topics and bring some information out for folks to be aware of. They can really impact their lives for a long, long time.
Yeah, absolutely. I talk generally, I've talked before about people when they're older, 50 and up, sometimes even older than that, and they're looking at a change in their marital status, for whatever reason, uh, they're finding themselves in a situation where they're experiencing a divorce, and that can be after a very lengthy marriage. And we've seen more of what they call those gray divorces increasing just all over the country. I think I had a statistic that I wanted to see here that Pew Research Center said just late last year, to give you an idea of how much this is increasing. So in the 1990s, they had about not even one per thousand, zero point 0.9 people per thousand were older and getting divorces. And that went up to 10 in 1,023, and then doubled again to 22 per thousand just towards the end of last year. So it's really it's really becoming more prevalent, um, and I'm glad you're here to be able to talk about some of those things. So tell
Yeah.
us kind of what you do with Sand Oak Financial, and then some of the things that we're going to touch on.
Sure. Yeah. So I have two businesses. I have the Sand Oak Financial Partners, which is more of my Um, in that side of my business, I help folks to actually organize and coordinate everything about their financial picture and all the things that go along with that. The second business that I have, similar sounding name, but it's definitely focused is different, and that's Sand Oak, the sand like the beach, oak like the tree, divorce
Yeah.
solutions. And in that aspect, or in that business, I'm focusing on helping people answer their financial questions when they're actually going through divorce. And I've been doing that divorce specific business for about the last 11 years. The
Yeah.
financial planning practice as a whole has been about 20 years. You did mention at the beginning, I retired as a lieutenant colonel. I spent 20 years in the Air Force, actually as a general dentist. That's what I did
I
before.
know. I was going to ask you
Yeah.
something surprising we may not know. And then I saw you were a dentist, and I thought, wow, you're an
Yeah.
overachiever.
Before, yeah, before, but finance was just a big part of just conversations I was having with people during the time I was in the military. And the divorce business kind of came about also because in my own family, we we had 7 divorces in my family,
Wow.
including my own many, many years ago. So I saw that impact, but I've also seen mistakes over the last 11 years or so that people have made, that when I talk about time and stress and money and relationships with their kids, I'm trying to make it a kinder and a gentler process, bring in education and to help with that. But you're right, at the Great Divorce, that group of people over 50 is probably the fastest growing group when it comes to the divorce rates in the last few years.
Well, and a couple things, correct me if I'm wrong, that people are living longer, and then there's these issues that come up with long-term care. Man, those are not only stressful, they can be financially devastating.
Right.
So is it we're grappling with more of these issues, or is it just what do you see any one reason or just a multitude of reasons?
Well, I have heard some of the reasons that this is happening is that, folks, they reach the time in their lives where their kids are grown and they move out. Some might move back in at some point, but but they move out, and then there's just a change in their lives and where their focus has been for a long time, and that can be a large part of it. And so you can have health issues that come into play. I mean, there's various things like that. I mean, that group is dealing. There's potential housing issues, changes in standard of living. When they're actually going through divorce, and timing issues and those kinds of things too. So there are a lot of big issues that folks need to have conversations with and deal with and
Right.
come to agreements when they're actually going through divorce at that age.
Well, and I want to give you an opportunity to tell people how to get in touch with you if they want to talk with you more.
Sure.
And then we'll do that again at the end. And then also, so out there, I will have some information on my website, nancycogar.com, and with the podcast that you can get in touch with David, and learn more about what he does. So we're going to try to move through a lot of that today, but there's always some certain, just like what I do, there's always a different circumstance and some, the fact pattern when we're going to go through a couple scenarios, but it can make a big difference as far as what happens in one case versus what happens in another.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Um,
So give us
I-
your, while I'm thinking of it, before I go off on some rabbit trail, give us your contact information.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. My website is just like my business name. It's www.sandoakdivorcesolutions.com. So there's a lot of information there. People can contact me, schedule a time to talk if they'd like to. They can also reach me by phone directly if they want to call my office. Can I provide that number as well? Is that okay?
Sure, go for it.
Yeah, it's as you said, I'm in Chattanooga, so it's 423-305-6185, and they can actually schedule the time to talk. Right now, I'm offering complimentary 30-minute, just appointments to kind of see where folks are,
Mm,
understand if I'm the right resource for them. If not, try to refer them or get them pointed in the right direction to get them started.
mhm. Oh yeah,
That's the easiest
having
way
that
to reach me.
opportunity to review and talk, and it's always makes sense, especially from the standpoint when it comes to assets and so forth. Um, we're going to talk more specifically about some of the things you do, but just to kind of to emphasize, if somebody's out there and they're older and they've already walked through a divorce, of course they're going to know how disruptive that was based on their circumstances. But for
Mhm.
people out there that just haven't experienced that, or maybe facing it now, this can affect a lot of very significant areas, not just emotional and physical and mental and just your living arrangements, but I mean all
Right.
kinds of things, right?
Exactly. Yeah, as I mentioned, you've got housing issues, you have income issues, a change in, uh, they made this promise to each other till death do us part many, many years ago. And now that relationship is, coming apart. So the remaking or having new friends and social circles and understanding that they don't have very long to recover financially from what is about to happen. when they're dividing their assets. All these things they've worked together for so long for. Sometimes there's career changes that need to be made. Folks to go back to school, all kinds of health insurance issues and changes. There are a lot of issues that folks need to deal with. And with all the emotions on top of all that, and most of the time, what I've seen is one spouse is like ready to go. They're ready to go out the door, and the other one's just finding out about it. And it
Yeah.
takes a while for them to catch up. And so, and oftentimes too, I see one spouse that's been sort of handling the family finances, and the other
Mhm.
spouse might, do something else that's important in the family as well. But to get both spouses up to speed equally, so to speak, as to where they are, what they can do, and the long-term consequences of their decisions. That's a that takes a lot. That's
Yeah.
a big ask, but it's also a very important thing because they have that, then they can certainly be more confident in their decisions and and just feel and come up with a better agreement that they're more likely to stick with.
Yeah, I mean it's really a crisis, and that makes it hard to reason things out sometimes. But you sent me a great handout, and I think there's going to be some resources on the website too, that I think people you're going to learn some things, and it's very sobering. Some of the things you were telling me about, you're talking about impacting retirement, financial security. If you're 20 and you get a divorce, well, that's terrible, but you've got more recovery time, generally speaking. If you're 50,
Sure.
60, and then you've got a gut of retirement account, you don't have as much recovery time, right? Uh,
Exactly. And if they don't do it, if they don't do the division of those retirement accounts correctly, you mentioned the word gut, they can gut themselves by, some potential penalties and things that they are exceptions to those if they
mm,
do the process correctly through what's called a quadro, if it's a
mhm,
certain type of retirement account. And that's something that I can assist people with too as part of the services that I do,
mhm.
is to help them understand what those options are. So yeah, definitely a big change.
Yeah,
Might
I mean,
take
not to
two
mention, some of
households.
the things I see with inheritance and estate planning issues and long-term care planning, all of a sudden you don't have somebody, probably the person that was listed first on your powers of attorney and all that. Health insurance changes are likely, Social Security, Medicare. Um, these are big, big things.
They are when I mean, typically with health insurance, for example, most of the time, I mean, one spouse is not going to be able to stay on their employer's or their other spouse's employer's group health insurance. They have to go out and get that on their own. At the cost for that, sometimes an increase in premium, they might even get less coverage. Social Security, they might have to be forced really financially to take it earlier than they expected, which is going to be a penalty basically that's built into Social Security. If you take it before your full retirement age, you've got situations if they're still working, for example, and they take it too early, their earnings that they make could actually reduce their Social Security benefits. And so those kinds of things that you mentioned inheritances and estate planning, that's a huge part. You've got beneficiary changes you need to consider.
Hmm.
You've got bank account registrations, all those things that you talk to folks about
Oh,
all the
sure.
time, that are important to make sure that they get done in non-divorce situations. But in, a divorce
You know,
particularly, they need to get those documents updated. And I've actually put together I've got a 3-page transition checklist of lots of things that folks need to consider when they're in that post-divorce stage that as a
mm-hmm.
reference that I like to use to say, hey, just because you get your agreement, don't stick it in a drawer and not worry about it. You've got lots of steps that you still have to take. You've got to follow through and close the loop, close up all the loose ends, and don't leave all these things, just sitting there undone. Because
Right.
you probably have seen situations that can lead to much bigger problems when the
Absolutely.
action's not taken early on.
Preach it. Yes. Don't put your estate planning in a drawer. And obviously you need to pay attention to these issues and you really need some help. So that's why I'm glad David's here today to kind of talk a little bit about these things. And you can reach out to him right here in Chattanooga. He has multiple businesses. He's got Sand Oak Divorce Solutions, right?
Yep.
Which helps with um, those aspects of getting a divorce later in life. And then you've got another uh, part of the business that deals with military divorces.
Right.
And I started to look at that and I thought, holy cow, complicated. um, but I want to talk about some of that. And then I also thought that we could maybe look at a couple scenarios, fact patterns, and work through those, and people can
Sure.
kind of see what we're talking about. I thought that would be helpful.
That
So,
sounds like a good plan.
okay. All right. Well, stick with me. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody. We are talking DIVORCE today, and it's not that much fun, is it? I always wish, you could find something different than getting a divorce, but they still happen. And when the older you get, the more complicated sometimes they can be too. So, joining me today is David Smith, who's from Sand Oak Divorce Solutions, which is his business here in Chattanooga. And he also um, has and I know I'll butcher it, but you've got another companion business that specializes in another area of divorce, which I wanted to talk about. And that's military people. And it's complicated enough with what we just talked about in the first half of the show, but you get somebody who's in the military, vested in the military, the families relying on, you know, VA benefits, retirement, you know, maybe college benefit, any of that kind of stuff. It makes me nervous to even think about it. Um, so So you are a specialist and certified and a retired officer, lieutenant colonel of the U.S. Air Force. So I'm sure all this is very familiar to you, and you've seen the good, bad, and the ugly. But um, what kinds of things are we talking about here?
Sure. Yeah. Anything related to divorce, whether it's military or not, I actually do that under the umbrella of my Sando Divorce Solutions business. So it is part of the military
Okay.
part, non-military part. It all kind of falls under that same business umbrella. But the uniqueness and nuances of military divorce definitely, those pieces stand out. There are things like when folks start thinking about all the different parts of the military divorce, you have pension division, excuse me. Obviously, that military is one of those few organizations around that still have defined benefit pensions. You've got survivor benefits and questions around that. There's equivalents to 401k in the military called thrift savings plans and dealing with those. So there are, and then there are also you mentioned disability. When someone has a VA disability rating and they're receiving some of their military retirement benefit, well, let me rephrase that. Technically, their disability benefit is their benefit. It's not actually part of their retirement benefit. So they could be getting pay from multiple, at least a couple of different places. Some of that's divisible and some of it's not.
Right.
And folks sometimes think that it's all, and some of it all is divisible. There are parts of it that can be used for calculating spousal support, child support, for example, but can't be divisible. And so you get into questions about what happens, for example, if a person's VA disability rating increases.
Hmm.
How does that impact the former spouse's portion? Because it does. It
Mm.
definitely does. And so there are
And there's
lots of
not much
different
they could
areas
probably
like
do
that.
about it either, because it's just what the standard is. So, right.
Well, there is not anything they can do about that change, you mean, the increase?
Yeah.
Well, they can indirectly, or I'd say indirectly, from the standpoint of addressing it with some language in their settlement agreement or
Mhm.
equivalent of whatever it's called in Tennessee. Um, because that's a contract between the individuals. So,
Okay.
courts can't order necessarily that a service member makes up for the change that happens, but there can be language in the settlement agreement that can address it if it happens, then what action could be taken.
Mhm. Yeah, but the average individual probably wouldn't even think about some of those things.
True.
Yeah.
They're not necessarily thinking about it. So that's why it's important if you've got somebody on your team that's familiar with a lot of this, just like again, you're a specialist in what you do. To have someone come talk with you and find out if I do this particular way, what impact could that might have on myself or my family in the future. So just understanding what could happen and the possibilities and building that cushion in contingencies, so to speak, of trying to do the best you can to address those things early on so that it's less likely a big negative impact in the future.
Again, you sent me a checklist, and I was gasping at some of the things, thinking about how wide ranging it is. I mean, everything from pensions you've mentioned, survivor benefits that can change, length of service and the impact of the benefits there, health coverage, TRICARE, and financial impacts, long-term care. The increasing need of having caregiving services. What do you do if you've got to go into an assisted living? How does that get paid for? This is not,
Yeah,
it's not where, when people come to me for planning, it is not where you want to go alone to try to negotiate these things.
right. And I'll give an example of it. It's kind of a blend of what we're talking about here in divorce and in your particular area of estate planning, long-term care planning. One of the things that I do is I for my clients and that when they're going through this divorce is I want to make sure that all of their life insurance, their disability, their sick and injured, their long-term care policies, if they have one, or coverages, we review all of that because
Mhm.
many times, I mean, couples can have joint life insurance policies. They have joint long-term care or some kind of not a joint long-term care policy, but riders, things that can benefit the other person if one person doesn't use it all, for example. And
Yeah.
so,
Hmm.
yeah, knowing those things and talking about what can we actually do with this particular piece, or what can we not do if it's an annuity, for example, what can be done with that versus a bank account, for example, those kinds of things. So yes, there are lots of areas to consider. You mentioned earlier vesting. Technically, a military member doesn't vest until they get their 20 years in. I mean, in
Hmm.
other words, they're not going to start receiving a benefit until that point. Now, reserve members are even different. They may not start collecting their benefit typically till age 60. I started receiving my benefit for the military when I was 46.
Hmm.
When I
That
retired after
timeline can be
26,
different, I guess. Yeah.
drastically different, right? Long
Well,
waiting period of time, before something can start
yeah.
paying out.
Well, it just makes so much sense that you do what you do with the background that you have. So we're gonna provide some information of how to get in touch with David, but I wanted to do a couple fact patterns. So
Sure.
I always see messes and I like straightening them out.
Yeah, sure.
But yeah. Here I made up a couple. I was going to read this one and just tell me kind of what you think would be some of the issues that we would face. So okay, so we've got a married couple that's been together 25 years. The husband is retired firefighter paramedic, and he was severely injured September 11th in the towers attack. So he had gone and worked for the fire department after he retired with full benefits from the military. I see them doing that a lot, yeah. And then he moved to Tennessee with his wife about 20 years ago. They still rely on his VA benefits for almost all their care. He's 63, so he's not Medicare yet. She's younger. She's 59, and when they moved to Tennessee, she enrolled in college. Okay, she's older, going back to school, redefining herself, and has accumulated about 250,000 in student loans, and half of those are still owing. She's worked as an accountant for 15 years, so she became the breadwinner later in life. And, that combined with the benefits that he had. So now they've reached an impasse and they're looking to get a divorce. Wow, that is, there's a lot in there. But, that's not unreasonable that might be a circumstance that we're seeing.
Exactly.
What take note of when you hear that?
Right. The things that I noticed in this again, that could potentially apply to this fact pattern is when he joined the fire department. So if someone typically, I'm like, if they're working for a municipality of some sort, sometimes a lot of times they still have pensions that are available to them later on. But some of those plans, many municipal plans, are actually not divisible. It's written into the plan that you can't do that. It's not allowed, for example. And
Mhm.
so that's another part of, knowing what you can do with a plan ahead of time. So you've got to understand the retirement accounts that they have and what can or cannot be done with them. The husband's 63, not ready for Medicare, so they're going to have to deal with some kind of, a change in healthcare planning again, or the healthcare coverages. It could be a potential issue, and he's got VA benefits, but I mean, for his spouse, you know, how
Do
much
they have
of
to
an
look at
impact or
something new,
cost
I
is that
guess?
going to
Yeah.
be?
Hmm.
Exactly.
Hmm.
She's also 59. She's still only got about 6 months, but there's a 59 and a half rule out there the IRS has about taking money out of particular types of retirement accounts with no penalty, early withdrawal penalty or not.
Mm.
So you have to look at that. Um, Again, she enrolled in college. She's older, and he's obviously also already retired. But one of the things to look at with military divorce, for example, is GI Bill benefits and what can be done with those
Mm.
or
Yeah.
not, and how
And we
you
don't
handle
know
those.
here whether she used that or not.
No, it sounds like maybe not, depending, looking at when she did it time wise, perhaps.
Mm.
But there's a large amount of debt, at least 125,000 approximately we're talking about that needs to be paid off. If she's working as a CPA, I don't know this specifically, but if it's her business, for example, that she's not working with someone else, but she owns the business, there might be a valuation of the business that's needed as
Hmm.
part of the divorce, and also when someone is self-employed like that, what is determined to be income? Sometimes you see a lot of personal expenses are being
Yeah.
run through the business. So, and then lastly, they reached this impasse. I want to look at getting a divorce. The choice of the divorce method or the path they take is going to have a huge impact on their end result. A lot of folks think it's just, I'm going to go hire a lawyer and that's the only option I have. Not true. There are multiple ways that folks can actually go through this. That's one of the things I like to talk with them about, make sure they're aware of
Kind of
knowing what the
mediation in the
process is.
background.
Yeah,
Hmm.
mediation, collaborative divorce, kitchen table. If they have this is a lot more complex, they wouldn't do this that way. But if it's a relatively simple financial situation, maybe no children, young children involved, for example. So understanding what their divorce process option is going to have a big impact on the amount of control they have, how much time it takes to get through something, their cost ultimately, and also the relationships they have with their children in the future. It didn't say anything about kids here,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
older children get impacted by divorce too.
Oh, yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
just minors.
I see that a lot
Everybody gets
on my end
impacted by it.
too. I
Yeah,
actually, you talk about divorce, I see a lot more people doing prenuptial agreements, postnuptial agreements. You get
yeah.
remarried when you're older or getting divorced when you're older. You're bringing a lot to the table most likely, and that makes it more complicated. You got to think about how these things would play out. You mentioned the inheritance. Maybe you want inheritance to go to one side of your side of the family versus the other side of the family, and those
Mm.
things have to be set out.
Yeah, I think one of the important things that I ask folks to do early on when they hire me or we decide to work together is I actually ask them to write out a timeline, just to do a bullet point of, when did you get married? What employers have you worked for? Where did you live? If you're married before, was something awarded or given in military, for example, to another spouse, another previous spouse. So it's getting that clear picture of their not just their finances, but just the way they've lived together, where they've lived, and what's happened. There's a lot of information, good information comes out of that. And so writing out that timeline, I think, is really important. That have to be extremely detailed, but it gives a lot of it opens up a lot of opportunities for conversation.
Well, regardless of whether you're, a military veteran or you're just an older person and you're looking at these issues, I mean, I think I would spend another half hour talking about the reasons that you might be able to help, with all these complex issues. But as to how, if someone does want to hire you or wants to talk to you about maybe looking at their particular circumstance, what do you need and how do they do that?
Sure. Well, they really, to be honest with you, when folks schedule an appointment with me, which they can do by either going to my website, my sandoakdivorcesolutions.com website, there's a contact me area there,
Mhm.
and they can set up a time to talk. As I mentioned before, I can do 30-minute, phone calls, or we can do a virtual for half an hour if they like. They don't have to bring anything except themselves. That initial time is just a time for us to talk, get to know each other. Let me find out a little bit about where they are. And also one of the key things is find out what's most important to them. I ask them questions like, what's your vision of what you want your divorce to look like when you actually if you feel like it was successful when you reach the end, how would you describe that? What is it that you actually want out of it, so to speak, and what you might be willing to say, well, that's not that important to me. This is more important, and kind of get those priorities and find out again situations that there have situations where I'm not the right person for them just because of the particular situation. But I'm happy to talk with anyone about
Right.
where they are, no matter where they are in the process. But I help folks whether it's before, during, and post divorce as well.
Yeah. I mean, I doesn't seem like there's any reason why you wouldn't want to talk to someone like you. I mean, these are just not things that ordinary people have any kind of level of experience working through. And you combine all those, I'm glad you do what you do, and I'm glad that you were here today. Love to have you back. Maybe talk about another one of these issues. We could talk about the frozen benefit rule. I've got lots of lingo now that
Yeah,
um,
I'd love to come back, and I also love what you do. I mean, it's critical that in my business, divorce or not, on the Sandoak Financial Partners side, you know, the estate planning is such a critical piece. When it's estate planning, it's tax planning, it's insurance planning, it's having a plan. Just asking folks, what actually is your plan?
hmm
If
yeah, we're gonna wing it.
occur
Don't wing it.
right, and
Yeah.
having someone, again, such as yourself, to provide that advice and get those pieces in place. And gosh, when you're talking about divorces and second marriages and blended families and the things that may come up in those conversations with property, et cetera.
Yeah.
um,
Whether you have a
that
large portfolio in, or a medium size, I mean, this really requires strategy. I mean, it's just a lot of moving pieces. So,
right, because what a person has, what a family has, is that, I mean, that's what they have.
yeah.
They're here, and they're about to divide this and start their lives over, in essence, in a different place, two different households, supporting two households. And so and there's a lot of things that you do not get a do-over.
Mm,
And when you do property division and so forth, it's like, okay, that's a done deal.
mhm,
Other things, spousal support, maybe child support, alimony,
right.
can be modifiable depending on age, for example, or reaching retirement, depending on laws for the state or what a judge orders.
Right.
Potentially, it could change or drop off or decrease, for example. So yeah, definitely a lot of changes that occur in folks' lives.
Yeah. Yeah. Too important not to spend some time on. Um, Tell us again how if somebody watching today wants to find out more to get in touch with you, how can they do that?
Sure. Yeah, they can call my office direct if they want here in Chattanooga. That number is 423-305-6185. I mentioned my website, sandoakdivorcesolutions.com. I actually do not have a website for my Sandoak Financial Partners business. That one is not, out there for social media, but the divorce business is. And I would like to mention too, this is relatively recent that this has occurred. But I didn't say this specifically previously, but one of the designations I have is a certified divorce financial analyst. The acronym for
Hmm.
that, of course, is CDFA. There are lots of CDFAs around the country. There are some CDFAs that practice like I do with their own business and they kind of a focus on divorce financial planning. Other CDFAs don't maybe not necessarily have that much focus. But what I wanted to say is the organization that awarded my designation has recently come out with a public website.
Hmm.
It's easy. It's www.cdfa.com, just like the acronym for Certified Divorce Financial Analyst.
Hmm.
There's a directory in that website. When you go there, you can find CDFAs all across the country. You can
Hmm.
also
Okay.
find CDFAs that have specialties, such as military, working with federal employees, special needs situations,
Great.
stock options. So other folks that are going to hear this from not just Chattanooga or Tennessee, but from around the country, there are many of us out there that do this kind of work that care very much about what we do and how we
Hmm.
do it and helping people get through it. So that is a way that folks can find someone. The CDFAs, though, can work around the country. They're not limited by state lines. It's not a state
Great. Good to
registration.
know too. That's good
So
to know.
help folks
Yeah.
from many different states and across the country. But I just wanted everybody to know
No,
that
I'm
that
glad you
was
did. And maybe we can put that link on there too. And I do have those people out there. I see you blinking away in California, New York, and even in some other countries too. So um, it's good for them to know that. They may be stationed somewhere and needing to get some information. So that comes with the territory, right? So
Yes, I've talked with folks that are overseas in the military.
yeah,
Maybe a big time difference, but we're able
yeah.
to do it.
But you can work it out. Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, great. And we are going to have for those of you here that you think, well, I missed that, or I have a question about that. You can reach out to David Smith. You can also go on the website. I will have some resources there for you, and you can go to David's website, which is sandoakdivorcesolutions.com. Right.
Yeah,
All right. I
good
didn't want
job.
to
Yeah.
leave anything out. So, all right. Great. Well, thank you for being with us today here on Boomer Time. And like I said, I hope you'll come back and see us again. And I think it's going to be a real benefit for everyone. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you allowing me, come on, and I look forward to being a guest again if we can arrange that.
Absolutely.